This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. 7 St. Louis Public Schools buildings were among the 5,000 structures that sustained damage since an EF3 tornado tore through a swath of St. Louis 6 months ago. We've been talking this hour about progress that's been made and progress that remains to be seen. Nearly halfway through the 2025-2026 calendar, many students and their families and teachers are eager to return to their original schools. SLPS officials are saying there is a plan to reopen some of those buildings by next semester. Here to talk with us about what's been shared about that plan and what has been happening over the past 6 months is STLPR education reporter Hiba Ahmed. Hiba, welcome back to St. Louis on the Air.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks.
But before we get to details of the last 6 months, what's the sense that you're getting from students, teachers, and residents about the school closures and whether they feel the reopenings will actually happen?
Yeah, so in my conversations with teachers, parents, students, who belong to those tornado-closed schools, a lot of them are eager to get back into their buildings, right? We've had kind of irregular updates about the status of those closed schools over the last 6 months. Of course, the district had to immediately close them in the immediate aftermath because the storm hit. We have to remember, like on a Friday when kids were heading back home, there was still 1 week of school left. And so they were closed throughout the summer. There really wasn't much of an update until October when board members started asking more questions about what is the status of these buildings? Can we do some temporary repairs to get some of these students back in their classrooms to maybe help remediate some of the trauma of being displaced?
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to when the school year started. You just mentioned October. The school year began in August. At that point, how many students had been displaced from their home schools and how many teachers?
Yeah, so it was about 2,000 students that were enrolled across those tornado damaged schools at the end of last year. So that's around the rough estimate of students that we believe that were displaced. And of the teachers, so all of the teachers, there are hundreds and hundreds of teachers who work across all 7 of those buildings, were co-located to other buildings within the district. So the students, their teachers, their desks, their stuff was all moved to all those other schools. And that's where they've been since the start of the school year in August. Yeah.
Was there a noticeable difference in enrollment or attendance at the beginning of the year compared to what was expected?
Yes, yeah. The first couple of weeks of school, the first week of school actually in particular, did definitely see a dip in enrollment, especially at those tornado damaged schools. We should say attendance is different than enrollment, right? Attendance is the number of kids who are actually showing up to school. Enrollment is the number that district officials believe this is how many students are going to report back to our classrooms for the school year, right? So yes, attendance definitely took a hit for the first week of school, but attendance is usually a little bit lower at SLPS during the first week of school, and it steadily climbs, especially after the Labor Day weekend. I think it's just people are still adjusting to the fact that school starts before Labor Day.
Yes.
But of course, yes, there was attendance dip. Those numbers, thankfully, have grown. The latest numbers from September show that at some schools, it's actually doubled the attendance. So kids are showing up to, again, those co-located locations. Yeah.
So if we do think about then the schools that have closed, can you remind us which schools those are?
Yeah. It's Washington Montessori Elementary School, Yateman Lydell Middle School, Beaumont High, which is home to some of the district's career and technical programs, think like cosmetology and HVAC, Hickey Elementary School, Ashland Elementary, Soldan International Studies High School, and Sumner High School.
And I think it's important to get those schools named so that they're not these abstract places,
No,
right?
These are schools that people love, and they're they are the anchors within their neighborhoods.
So what is the latest update then about these 7 schools? There was an announcement recently about reopening like early next year, right?
Yes. Yeah. The district has proposed that they are working towards reopening Washington Montessori Elementary School, Yateman Lydell Middle, and some of those career and technical programs at Beaumont High. And the reason for that is because the damage to those buildings is a little less intense. So that's like blown out windows have been replaced with temporary windows and such. So The school board has to vote to approve the district's plan. That should happen in December, but that means some of those schools could reopen as early as January after winter break.
Mm-hmm. How did that news land with community members?
Yeah, I mean, we're still hearing from folks. I think it's pending the school board's approval, so we don't have a definitive, here we go, kids are going back to school. But, those schools are beloved. I think, again, community members, especially for the little ones, the little kids. We're talking about Washington Montessori. Those are pre-K through fifth grade students. I know that their parents are probably eager to get those kids back into their classroom, their home classrooms. And, we'll talk about this in a minute, Elaine, but, we got a chance to tour Washington Montessori, and it really does look very good and ready to welcome back students.
And I drove over that way so that I would have the freshest sort of sense of maybe what you saw.
Sure.
That tour that you did, talk with us about that. And it was Sumner High and Washington Montessori.
Right. Yeah. So two very different stories in front of us. So Washington Montessori, I'll start with a good one. It looks, it feels, walking through the hallways, the floors were squeaking and it smelled like disinfectant, and it really felt like the building was almost ready to welcome back students. There are a couple more things that the district said that they're working on. They want to pull out the carpet and for some of the little kids, the pre-K and the kindergarten classrooms, because they're worried about any like small shards of glass that maybe came from the blown out windows. They want to make sure they pull all that carpet out. But that building, I mean, it's astonishing. Elaine, you got a chance to drive by. I mean, that neighborhood it's a Fountain Park neighborhood. It was hit really badly by the storm. If you look directly across the street, there's a closed school, a previously closed school that has sustained so much damage. So it in comparison, Washington Montessori looked like it was untouched. And in terms of Sumner is a harder picture to look at. We have some of the photos up online, but from when you're standing on the sidewalk, it's hard to tell the extent of the damage, and that is like the question that we got from community members, right? We were hearing a little bit of skepticism from folks saying that, hey, are these buildings as damaged as they seem? Because from where I'm standing, it looks fine, or it's a couple of blown out windows, or maybe some roof damage. But when we got a chance to go inside of Sumner, we really saw the extent of the water that has come in from subsequent thunderstorms over the last 6 months that has warped the floors. It's just water stains everywhere. Ceiling tiles have disintegrated. I mean, the school was sitting kind of frozen in time, but the damage is quite extensive.
The other four schools, you did not mention Hickey Elementary, Ashland Elementary, Soldan International Studies High School, and Sumner as ones, to reopen.
Yeah.
So what's the holdup there?
Yeah, the damage is far more extensive at those schools. So there are plans to get those schools, the repairs on those schools done later in 2026. I think Hickey is projected to be done in August 2026, which put it in a position to reopen in time for the next school year. And then for Ashland, Sumner, and Soldan, the damage is quite extensive. I want to point to Ashland in particular. Ashland, unfortunately, was also pillaged by, people who have come by after the storm and stolen, metal wiring and metal pipes from within the building, which is something that we've heard about, over the last 6 months, right? But those schools are slated to have the repairs done by December 2026, so maybe they'll reopen for January 2027. So we're talking about more than a year from now. Yeah.
And how much of this has to do with money?
Yeah, money is a big part of this. The district says that part of the reason, so they finished all their surveying, right? Their insurance company came in, FEMA came in, SEMA, the state emergency, agency came in and did their surveys, and they spent the summer basically doing that. And then the district had to kind of pivot and was talking more about transportation. They had to take a bit of a pause on talking about the storm damaged schools. And then they came back to the conversation in October. But yeah, money is a big part of it. They wanted to confirm that they were actually going to be reimbursed for a lot of these costs. They now estimate the cost of damage to be from $5 to $15 million. And that's been revised significantly down from the original $77 million that was projected right when the storm had hit. Part of the reason for that, the chief of operations, Square Watson, explained to me was that he thought maybe this was going to be replacing an entire roof or maybe entire walls of windows, but it's not exactly going to be that. It's the point here is to get the buildings back to where they were before the storm. And Elaine, a lot of these buildings are old. They had a lot of outstanding repairs, but they're going to try to get them back to a place where it's safe for the students and staff to return.
Yeah. And final 30 seconds or so, for people who have been doubly or triply displaced, what have they shared with you about why moving kids back to their original schools is important?
It's because it's getting back to a sense of normalcy, right? Schools, again, are anchors within their communities. I visited with a family that was right outside of Hickey, and she said, I want those kids to come back because I love living next to a school. So I think that's what community members are really waiting on.
Hiba Ahmed is the education reporter at St. Louis Public Radio. Hiba, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This episode was produced by Darius Barner.
Audio engineering and sound design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.